Hi entrepreneurs, I just finished the book Influence, The Science of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini, and I'm excited to share with you my top 3 tips as always about this book. But just before we dive into those tips, a really quick intro about the book. Basically the premise is that us humans, rather than considering all the available info about a particular item or situation and logically making the best decision, oftentimes we take mental shortcuts, and that helps us make decisions faster. So Robert Cialdini identifies 6 categories of these shortcuts and teaches us how they work, how we could potentially use them ourselves, how other people have used them in the past, and also how to recognize that someone's using it on us and fight back if they're doing so maliciously or trying to be a profiteer. Now, since this isn't a full, thorough book review and summary, for example, I'm not going to dive into all of them in detail. You're going to have to read the book for yourself to find out that information. But I will give you 3 of my most memorable points and touch on some examples for each one, what I thought, and some ideas on how you can use them to improve in your business. So number 1 is the principle of reciprocity. And that means that if you give someone something, then they'll feel a strong innate obligation to give you something back. Even if they don't necessarily like you or know you that well, or whoever is the one that's giving them the first favor or gift, for example. They actually did many studies on this that shows significant changes in behavior if someone who tries to interact with you or asks you for something gives you something first as a gift or a favor. Like for example, in restaurants, if waiters give your bill with a little candy or a little mint, then statistically speaking, the people who receive those, the diners, are more likely to give a higher tip. And if you give more of those mints or candies, then those tips increase even more. And this is not just like one example. This is spread across a lot of experimentation and studies. Also in the book, he talks about a really memorable experiment where someone walks into the room and talks to people at a public space and gives them a free Coke as like a goodwill or a gift. And then afterwards, they ask them to buy raffle tickets. And then on the other side, the same person goes in the public place with a different set of people, don't give them anything, and ask them to buy raffle tickets. As you can imagine, the people who got the Coke bought way more raffle tickets, even though they probably don't give a crap about the raffle tickets, and not to mention the raffle tickets themselves cost way more than what the free Coca-Cola cost. Well, depending on what you do specifically, you can try many different things. Like if you're in the food business, you can give out free samples, which always works very well. Also, if you're just meeting with someone for an important meeting and want to build a relationship, you might give them a thoughtful gift, one that they like and appreciate. But also do recognize that many people may try this on you and make you feel obligated to buy something from them by giving you something for free at the beginning. So definitely try to recognize this, and don't feel bad if you say no if you recognize they're trying to do this to profit off you in a way that serves them more than you, per se. Tip number 2 is the category of liking. Now this is a pretty simple one. The more someone likes you, the more likely they're going to agree with you or buy something from you and just work with you, right? So the question now becomes, what do people like? Well, attractiveness is a big one that many people have done studies about. But honestly, most people in this world are average when it comes to look, right? So in that regards, at least, some things that you can do is work on personal hygiene, grooming, wear some fragrances that people like cologne or perfume, and so forth. But besides looks, something else that people really like are people that are similar to them, right? I mean, this is something that makes sense. You can connect with people more that have something in common with you. So in that case, when you're meeting someone for the first time, entering into a business relationship, you might try to find something that you have in common with and then connect in that point and bond together at that point, just so that it makes it more likely that they're willing to work with you. Finally, another thing that people like is just to be complimented and praised. This is really funny because, as the book explains, the praise doesn't even have to be true per se in order for them to really like that and change their behavior as a result. But obviously it can't come across as insincere or that you're sucking up to them too hard, because then that will backfire on you. It's also interesting to note that this tip was also given in the other book by Dale Carnegie that I read and reviewed on this channel recently, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He talks about a lot how to get people to like you and therefore would make them more likely to do stuff for you. So lessons from that book and this book: compliment people, be sincere about it, give them a lofty reputation to live up to, and that will just make them like you more, make it easier to work with them. So definitely keep that in mind. Last but not least, tip number 3 has to do with scarcity. And the basic concept around this is that people value something more the less available it is, or the less available that it becomes. So this is interesting because the underlying item may not be experienced any differently, but people wanted more afterwards. Like in the book, they did an experiment with a set of cookies. Someone got a set of 10 cookies, someone only got 2. In the case of 2, they valued the cookie a lot more, even though it tastes the same. They didn't rate the taste any different, but they just wanted the cookie more. Like the fact that they could possess that rare item in and of itself was what they wanted. So that's really interesting and not necessarily intuitive in some ways. The fact that the possession of the item is what's valued more than the actual experience of the item. Another interesting piece of information is that scarce information is valuable too. So if someone knows that the information that they're hearing is scarce, they're going to change how they perceive what's in the underlying message. So they'll think that it's more true or important or valuable per se. One example of how this manifests itself in daily life is in some department stores. Salesmen see people teetering over some certain items and they come over and say, oh, sorry, these have been pre-reserved, so you can't have it anymore, but that's too bad because it's really highly in demand. And then a few minutes later, they come back and say, oh, actually, we found one in our storeroom in the back. And then that makes the people get off the fence and decide to buy. So that's one way that this scarcity aspect makes people think of something as more valuable per se. And this is what FOMO, or fear of missing out, is based on. Another interesting lesson or example from the book is that one guy reported that a car salesman would book a lot of prospective buyers to come in and take a look at the same car at the same time. And so when they all show up, they're like, what the heck? I thought this was mine. And they start like competing with each other and getting angry and getting a feverish pitch to want to own that car and like beat the other person. Whereas the car by itself is nothing special. It could just be a plain and ordinary car, but it's the fact that they owned it and possessed it and beat out all those other people that has taken them from rational people to irrational actors. So doing this in an ethical way, maybe you can highlight some scarce assets of your own business. Like if you're in the service business, you can tell clients that there's a lot of other ones you're talking to and you honestly don't have time to take them all, and there's only a couple spots left, and so that may help highlight the scarce component of your time. That's just an example. Okay, so in conclusion, I really enjoyed this book and learned a lot from it. I'm definitely going to go over and reread it and take deeper notes. One thing I want to note is that when reading Amazon reviews, a lot of people were saying like, this is so long, you could do it in like a third of the length. But the point is that there's a lot of examples and stories, and I think this is really helpful because it helped me think of ideas how I can take their example and do it a little bit differently for myself. So I highly recommend reading the whole thing instead of a summary. Another interesting point about this book is that it's really scientific and it's done in a very experimental fashion. So they take experiments and control different aspects and change different variables and report the statistics. It's not just anecdotes like it was in Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is a lot more scientific approach to psychology and so forth. So thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed these 3 tips. As always, you can support me by liking this video. And if you want to get more tips for your business to help brainstorm ideas and so forth, follow along by subscribing to this channel. Let me know what you want to hear next. This is Kevin, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.